Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 23rd of March 2024, just hanging on to the 23rd. It's a late one for me. Sorry I haven't got to the mapping already, it's been a very busy day, but thank you so much to Jao who's done the mapping. He did the mapping a lot earlier today, and in fact there have been some fairly significant changes around particularly Bakhmut, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So although it looks a very positive map for the Ukrainians, actually things are not going particularly well in that sector. There's a lot of news that has been, rewind. I would normally start by telling you what's going on in the north of Ukraine, across the border into Belgorod, the free Russian units operating there. I've heard virtually nothing today. Doesn't mean that things aren't happening, who knows? But I think there's so much news out today. There's been a lot of news about the Moscow terror attacks, and that's still rumbling on. Obviously, as it would, it's fresh in the news, and it's a big story. And these claims that they're connected to Ukraine, but actually more and more data is coming out to suggest ISIS did it. ISIS have not only admitted it publicly, but they've just released some body cam footage that is straight from the people who did it, apparently. So the idea that it's ISIS and a genuine terrorist attack is gathering more and more credence, and I think the idea that Russia is trying to opportunistically capitalize on the Kremlin is on the attacks, and in order to blame Ukraine is becoming so obvious that the British government has this evening announced that Russia is ill-advised to try and blame Ukraine for that. Anyway, that's strangling the bandwidth, but also right now, and I might do a breaking news update, the Ukrainians are absolutely hammering Crimea with cruise missiles, it appears. So Sevastopol, Simferopol, possibly Yevpatoria, Belbek Air Base, other places I'm sure in Crimea being targeted, some really big explosions happening there. So that is taking up a lot of the bandwidth right at the moment, and as a result, I'm just not too sure the details of what's going on north of the border. In fact, details aren't really very great about the front line as a whole. Lots of people really are focusing on a number of other topics at the moment. It's just so much going on. What Greg and Zhenya, who were in Chaziv Yar to the west of Bakhmut, they were there last night. Things are really freaking tough in Bakhmut, right? The Ukrainians have lost 22 positions. That's what they heard from the battalion commander there, that things are really challenging and they are on the back foot, and the likelihood is they're going to lose. Well, there are claims they've lost Ivanivska, as according to Russian sources tonight. Chaziv Yar will be on the cards pretty soon. They did say that one of the places that according to their sources and contacts, that has stabilized somewhat recently is this northeastern sector around Kupiansk. So that's good news, because this was one of the areas that there were rumors whereby the Russians supposedly had all these troops and they were getting amassing these troops and getting ready to take Kupiansk. I don't know that that's particularly imminent at the moment. Some good news for the Ukrainians. This is a pin that was there yesterday, to be honest, but I got my knickers in a twist and said, Jay, I might have got the colour wrong to that, because I thought there's a Suryat Maps gain for the Russians and then sort of worked back a bit. But actually it was Andrew Perpetua who had the Russians taking this whole forest area and then losing it again. And it was indeed a counterattack from the Ukrainians. So it is really dynamic there. The Russians took that forest area and then they lost it. So here's Andrew talking about that indeed.
So yesterday, I think it was yesterday, it was 2 days ago, I drew the Russians advancing here. And then yesterday I reversed it. And I kind of felt stupid. But then I got like a text message this morning when I woke up. I read the text message. The text message told me that I was right both times. That Russia actually did move up and capture all of this, legitimately captured it. And then yesterday they lost it all again. It was actually happened. Both things actually happened. It wasn't a mistake. And it made me feel better.
I read today that Ukraine did counterattack, and there's also the video of one of the Ukrainian tanks going in that direction and shooting into the forest, and
Yep.
so that seems to be related. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, so one of those moments where there was a substantial amount of land that swapped hands, really quickly in succession, and yeah, the Russians attack took it, the Ukrainians counterattack took it back. So that's that. Though also from Andrew, I was just remembering, looking through that video, just saying that actually they talked a little bit about the northern border, and one of the things that there are losses. There are times there was a accumulation of troops somewhere south of the border. I can't remember exactly where, but the Russians hit accumulation of troops, and with shelling, I think, and various shells landed amongst the troops, and there was sort of 50 to 60 casualties. I don't know how many dead, how many wounded, but yeah, there are some serious losses for the free Russian fighters up there that makes the evaluation somewhat more difficult to conclude that it's been well worth their while doing this, because they have taken some losses. There's also a lot of conversation about how badly Sumi's getting hammered. It is getting hit by these guided glide bombs that are being dropped almost with impunity across the border. In fact, Greg and Zhenya were saying that they've heard that Russian jets are actually even going as far as to cross the border. They're flying into Ukrainian airspace here in the Sumy area. So I can't speak to the accuracy of that claim, but it is not looking good in that Sumy area, to the point where NOAA report says a humanitarian catastrophe has begun in the Sumy region. Volunteer Katerina Andreeva reports, quote, banned phosphorus weapons were used in the border community of Velika Pisarivka. Hospitals are closed, 40% of the town's infrastructure is destroyed, pharmacies and shops are closed, she emphasised. And this is a place that I talked about the other day. Greg was saying it was absolutely hammered. Here it is, just the other side of the border from Gryvoron and Kazinka. This is one of the places that I think the Russians have taken revenge on for the attacks into Gryvoron. It has been absolutely flattened. I think it took 340 shells or something, as she said, largely flattened. And at the same time, by the way, and I think I showed you or referenced a video that had some huge explosions in Kazinka. The Russians are using guided glide bombs on their own settlements. They don't care about particularly people in Belgorod. Belgorod is an interesting oblast because even the language there is a mixture between Ukrainian and Russian. This is like the most Ukrainian area of Russia, or culturally close to Ukraine. And so here in particular, the Russians, I guess, are not going to care so much about the small border communities and whether they flatten them or not, because they are hammering their own communities in an attempt to destroy the Free Russia Legion that is there. So, yeah. Anyway, I digress. So we've found ourselves on the way to Bakhmut. If we come down from where we were, Terny and Torska area, there's still fighting in the forests here. There's some fierce fighting in Bilorivka. I think the Ukrainians have taken back some trenches, actually, a few trenches to the east of Bilorivka. Andrew Perpetua has some details of that. I can't remember exactly where, but it's somewhere around this area. But there's been a lot of fighting there over the last few weeks. The Russians have really been trying to pressure the Ukrainians. Not as good news as we come down, as mentioned, to Bakhmut, where although there's no changes to the mapping as far as this map is concerned, there have been significant gains, and this confirms. So this is what Surrey Maps are saying, and I think that's broadly confirming the worries that Greg and Zhenya were expressing, that the Ukrainians have lost 22 positions in this area. So the situation west and north of Bakhmut after 1 month of combat, the Russians took full control over Ivaniska, captured part of the Baba Mountain, and that forced the Ukrainian army, I don't know, there's a mountain there, but to retreat into the rest of the mountain complex and the surrounding hills and forests. On the other hand, the Russian forces advanced along the road between Bakhmut and Chasiv Yar and the railway, taking control of several positions and reaching the trench system, protecting the micro-district. It could be said that Russian troops are now 1.4 kilometers from there. Okay, so as you can see here, some fairly substantial gains for the Russians. Let's try and draw that onto my map just to let you know what is being claimed here. And I think I would somewhat trust what Surat Maps is saying here. So you've got this area there. The Russians appear to be in control, at least according to them. And then broadly speaking, you've got this going on. So this whole area, and Ivanivska is such a key settlement for this buffer zone between Bakhmut and Chasiv Yar that really, is next step Chasiv Yar itself. Bodanivka's held out. The Ukrainians done a really good job of withstanding the Russian attacks in that area. But down to the south here along this road, and this is the higher ground over here, which is frustrating. And I think that's what I don't know if it's what Surat Maps is definitely referring to, but it could be the capture of the part of Baba Mountain. I don't know if that's Baba Mountain, but that forced the retreat of the Ukrainians. Like I said, in the last few days, if you look here to the north of Ivanivska, this is your high ground. And if this is what the Russians are starting to gain control over, then that means Ivanivska itself is in trouble, because the Russians then have the view down onto the lower ground and have the ability to hit the Ukrainians who are trying to hold out there. So, as Andrew Perpetua's live stream also claimed, he was saying that the sources he speaks to says that Chasiv Yar will be lost by the end of summer type thing is a general belief, and that's what Greg's contacts have been telling us telling Greg for some time, that I think they are putting these defenses in behind Chasiv Yar, the much larger defenses, to keep hold of this loop of cities that's so important: Slovyansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka, Konstantinivka, and then you're going up to eventually to Siversk over here via Ryderok, and so on and so forth. So yeah, real challenge. Dobrova says another. This incredible. Like, you got Dobrova there, you got Dobrova there. I mean, what is going on? Anyway, that's by the by. It is looking very challenging in Bakhmut. And this is on the back of, the idea that the Russians are somewhat culminating. But at the same time, at least that's what I've been positing recently, but at the same time, the Ukrainians are exhausted. They've been fighting a long time. They have a real lack of equipment. They don't have enough troops. The idea is that they've got a paper army. Is what another thing that Greg and Jenny were saying, that some battalion commanders are like, I've got a paper battalion. And so on paper, this is who I've got, but half of them are injured, or dead, or missing, and it is really challenging. So the Russians will know that, and this is their time. I've said this previously, but the Russians are going to be thinking, if we are going to make serious ground, now's the time to do it before the Ukrainians start getting equipment in, like the Czech artillery ammunition initiative that's going to be starting to filter through presently, and other aid packages now that the appropriations have been sorted out. Joe Biden in the US is saying, right, now's the time to think about Ukraine aid. Well, he's saying that every day, but it's like he's saying it's really urgent. We need to put that through now. So there's some people are slightly more positive about the prospect of the US getting a bunch of aid to Ukraine. And that will mean that the Russians will find it much more difficult to make those gains. So now is the time. It's kind of strike while the iron is hot. And so you had the March 17th elections. There was the attempt to take ground before then. But I think also just in terms of the position of the Ukrainians, this is as good as a time as I think the Russians will have. at least before they can do some mobilization, but that might fall in line with Ukraine doing mobilization. It's going to be an interesting couple of months ahead, I should think. Right. In Avdiivka area, as you can see, Deep State map has some gains for the Russians just north of Berditsy, or around Berditsy, and around Tonyenka. Tonyenka is, well and truly Russian now. The question is, how far do the Russians move here? So I talk about this river that comes up and around there, and there is no doubt that the Ukrainians are pulling out this area to the east of the river. Greg and Jenny were, again, they were telling me today that they've just passed in this area. So driving here on the way to their next destination, they have passed a whole load of bridging vehicles. So there is, that would fit in line with the Ukrainians pulling equipment back across this river area as they are no doubt going to adopt better defensive positions on this high ground to the west of the river. But as I said, the question is, from Tonyenka, how far do they allow the Russians to push this way? Because the river curls round and goes directly to the west there, and so that means that the Russians have got some kind of freedom to try and push in this direction. So I guess we'll see. As interesting about Novelska just down here, and I talk about Novelska being a really super important place, considering how small it is, this tiny agricultural settlement that was the key to the Ukrainians stopping the Russians from flanking Pervomaisky, and indeed flanking Avdiivka in a larger sense. So in the end, the Russians went through Avdiivka, largely due to a lack of ammunition and their use of guided glide bombs, which is still an issue, and they're still releasing these with impunity. And Syriac Maps had the Russians taking Novelska. Andrew Perpetua in his live stream was absolutely adamant that is absolutely not the case. This is what Andrew says. You should all subscribe to his channel, of course, and watch all of his live streams. They are supremely interesting.
Novelska is getting heavily shelled, thus proving their stupid propaganda that they captured the town to be completely false. You can watch them shelling it. They shell it with tanks. They shell it with artillery. They hit it with mortars. The rumors of a cap.
So that is geolocated evidence that is present that the Russians are shelling Novelska, which means that the Russians aren't in Novelska because they're not shelling themselves. And so the idea that the Russians took Novelska was pure propaganda, which Syriac Maps has sucked up. And this is a kind of claim that gets Andrew really annoyed and results in public spat between Syriac Maps and Andrew Perpetua online.
Capture are obviously wrong, and we knew it was wrong because they raised a flag on a house that had a roof. Novelska, there's a funny thing in Novelska. It's a funny fact. There's literally no building that has a roof in that town, and they haven't had a roof in 8-10 years. So I don't know how they hung a flag on the roof, huh? Probably because it wasn't there, and it was stupid propaganda that people ate up for no reason. Okay, so that's
yeah, there you go. Seems pretty closed book on that one. Just to go back to the north and confirm what Syriac Maps has said about Tonyenka and Semenivka here, and this is out again since JR has done the mapping, so that's not in there, but it kind of confirms what Deep State Map has, but also has this whole area being under the control of the Russians, which wouldn't surprise me at all. It's just pushing the Ukrainians back over the river. So the Russian army continue advancing west of Tonyenka, while at the same time troops took control over the new forest belts at the eastern shore of the Derna River between Orlivka and Berditsy. Again, wouldn't surprise me that would be the case, and also pushing here to the west of Tonyenka. So anyway, sorry, it's a bit out of sync there, but as we come further down, you can see no changes to the mapping from any of the mappers around Krasnohorivka, Mariinka, Pobjeda, or Nova Mikhailivka. Interesting, Andrew was talking about around here how difficult it is for the Russians to push past here. It's very uneven ground, and it's very easy for them to be hit. And he's very adamant that this is grey zone, and the Russians do not control that area either. So that kind of underscores the difference between the mappers there. Yeah, and I think Andrew's sounds like his rationale is pretty spot on there. And not really any changes to the rest of the front line. So Velika Novosilka, Robotina, Krinky, no changes at all, but no doubt, tough fighting. The Ukrainians are still holding on to the Robotina area. Big differences between the mappers here. And there's still those differences still persist. So it'd be interesting to see what Andrew has to say about this area compared to what Surat Map says. But go and check out his live stream as I mentioned. But so that is the Frontline update. I might have a look and see whether there's enough information that's worthwhile doing about Crimea at the moment. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Thank you so much to the members and to the members on the higher tier who have been there for so long. Thank you for all you do, because it does allow me to keep doing what I do. Anyway, take care and speak to you soon.